Okay, let me
Yes.
start the recording. Okay, so welcome to the 63rd edition of PC Open Discussion. Today we'll be continuing what's new in 2021 release wave 2, and then we'll see what's there for today. But as normal, as we do every time, if you are here for the first time and you don't want to get worried about registering every week, then drop your name and email in the chat, and I'll make sure that you get invited in every future meeting unless you tell me to stop it. And if you're okay registering every week, then this page normally gets updated on Sunday. You can click on this link and register every week. Okay, so what happened last week? Directions EMA. And I don't know how many of you are on Twitter. If you're not, please go ahead and join Twitter. There is a lot happens about Business Central. You see there are great Twitter lists that you can follow just to get updates from different people. And I was not there physically, but I was able to see most of it from Twitter. And there are three things that I liked. Just wanted to share it. There are so many things that happen in Directions EMA, but the three things I guess that are important for developers / partners who are working in Business Central space. The first one, cloud migration. There is no limit or maximum limit of how much data you can replicate from on-prem to Business Central SaaS. Initially, there was a 30 GB limit when Business Central was initially launched. Then they bumped it to 80 GB. And at this point, they are saying there's no limit within star. Star means that whatever the size that you have purchased on SaaS, that will surely apply, which is now calculated based on number of licenses you have plus number of type of license and number of users that you have of that type. So if you have a big customer who want to go to Business Central SaaS, I guess it's time now that they can go to Business Central SaaS going forward. Now the next one is super important and I would like to spend some time on it. And if there are questions, feel free. As much as I know, I'll talk about it. And the second big thing that I was able to filter is reselling of non-universal offering. Now, anything that's a universal code, consider it as an app on app source. Any code which is not on app source, like all pertinent extension that you and me and other partners are building, are considered as non-universal code. All the pertinent extension that we are building. Now this slide is only talking about on-premises. So keep that also in mind. And based on two bad practices that still are allowed in the product, Microsoft is going to change it starting 2022. What are those two bad practices? One is modifying the base app for your customer. The second bad practice is to make your extension with target on-prem, which you do from, let me open my VS Code so that everybody can understand it, which you do here. You can add a property here called target on-prem. If you have any pertinent extension with target on-prem, then you are violating the second new rule that's coming up. And if you have, for any customer, have created a custom base app, then you are violating the first rule in this slide. Starting 2022, in our customer licenses, they need to buy more or less two different modules in the license, and this is all my assumption at this point. I'm pretty sure there will be more clarity as it will come, but two additional modules. Customer will might require customer to license two additional modules. The module 1 is implemented code in not an extension, and module 2 is implemented code is not cloud optimized, which means target set as on-prem. And you don't set it by mistake, as in you can. I don't know how people are, because sometimes developer feel like that, oh, I'm building this extension for on-prem customer, so I should be targeting is on-prem, but it is not. When you target it as on-prem, then the code which is tagged as on-prem, you are allowed to run it, like file management, like .NET codes and all. So if you have set it even by mistake, go ahead and remove this property. By default, it's set as cloud. Otherwise, what happens going forward is starting 2022, there is a price that customer need to pay per user, full user, per year. So if there are 10 users that customer have in their license, and they are in 2025, and they have a base app modified, then they are paying $2,500 just to make sure that their custom base app supports them. And there's an additional price for if your extension that you're building is not cloud optimized, which means it's targeted on-prem. Listed fees are primarily pricing and are subject to change. So it might change. I don't know. Will it decrease or increase? Well, it may change. Module implemented code in not an extension, which is this one, requires module this. So if you have a base op modified, that means you add up these two costs and then multiply with number of users. In this case, then it becomes $200 per user per year. Module name are subject to change. So they might change these modules and they will be part of the customer license, which they need to purchase if they are on-prem and they are using any of these two bad practices defined by Microsoft. Thoughts, questions?
This is all about killing on-prem and moving everybody on SaaS.
Let's look at from Microsoft perspective, or maybe in general perspective. It's not about killing on-prem. It's all about having your customer ready to be on SaaS, and partner don't become a blocker for it. So if my code is targeted as cloud or set to default, and I haven't modified the base app, that means I will not be a blocker as a partner for my customer if he want to. And still the decision to go to SaaS is still with customer. They're not forcing customers to go to SaaS, but they are kind of limiting partners to not to do something which may become a blocker in future, that even a customer wants, they cannot go to SaaS. Does that make sense, Sandeep?
To some extent, yes. Standard practices, fine. But putting a cost and for giving this on-prem offering is, if we are modifying base app, I can still understand. You are using Microsoft code, you are modifying it and reusing it. Microsoft is putting a cost on it. Yes, fine. But if there is an option available which allows you to target on-prem environment and very, very specific, say using DLLs is one of them. So now everything we will have to move to Azure functions.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, the second point, I kind of agree on that one. Base app, I never visualized Microsoft will give an option, but they had that option.
I was not expecting it, but they did it.
Yeah, they did. Okay, anyone else on this, or otherwise I'll move to the third one.
Well, simplistic question really. Did they fix a date for the end of on-prem?
No.
There is no date for end of on-prem.
This will kill it automatically.
Because you say this is a hint, like on-prem is ending soon. Get your stuff together, people.
I don't think so, because let's put it this way. There are some legal reasons for some companies that they can never go to cloud. So I doubt that on-prem is going away, and Microsoft understands it. So there are certain businesses who can never put that data on cloud for whatever the reasons are.
For regulatory reasons, really. Some companies in
Right.
some countries don't allow their companies operating, say, on that specific country to have the database hosted on a foreign country. It could be on a local SaaS on the same country.
No, so the local SaaS options are being added, that's for sure. But I for sure know some businesses like financial services and which need a database on their own servers. And I don't know the actual reasoning behind it. But yeah, I have heard from some customers that they can never go to SaaS, and not just because of the limitations or any problems, but because they are not allowed to expose their data to SaaS, more or less.
And I can give you one more example on this. And this
Yeah.
is very good example for on-prem requirement. Shopify, a few
Yeah.
years ago, closed down all their e-commerce sites for firearms in US because there was some shooting incident. So they told all their customers who were on SaaS, Shopify, that close down your website, we will not host you. So they were
Oh,
forced to go for on-prem versions.
oh, that's a good example. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, there Sam, as I was saying, I don't think it's end of era for on-prem. It's just that because it's literally on-prem follows the same rules as of SaaS, other than just this one limitation of having a target as on-prem. Other than this, everything is SaaS more or less. The code base is same on-prem or SaaS.
The basic idea is make it so costly or reduce the benefits of on-prem so that everybody goes for SaaS.
Hope so. Let's see what comes up. This is just an announcement that happened. I thought it's a good thing to kind of talk about it and have knowledge about it before it actually happens, because there are so many things changing so rapidly. Sometimes something fall between the crack. So keep your eye on this, everybody who is working on Business Central for their customers. Okay. When there is a directions, it also shows you glimpse of future. And here are some glimpse of future of what they will be working on. So the next release, 2022 release wave 1, which is March release. They'll be working on performance, resource governance, security, privacy, compliance. Okay. Onboarding, they'll add some help panel with third-party content and all. Okay, so that means ISVs will also have some say on onboarding, which is good. Action bar improvement, that's okay. Reporting, Excel report layout. Now this is interesting. I don't know what that is, but let's see what comes up with that. It says Excel report layout, so there might be something over there. Power platform, business events. Access for licensed team users for teams. Okay, so team integration, as you would have already seen, there's not so much focus from Microsoft about integration with teams with Business Central. So that is a continuous process. Developer tools for DevOps, personalization, and performance profiling. We have already seen pretty good things on profiling and personalization in DevOps, but let's see what comes up. And permission based on AD groups. Okay. Geographical expansion is quite a normal thing which happens in every release. So let's see. This is kind of a roadmap for the future, and then they haven't talked about REST as in the 2022 release wave 2 and all, but let's just slide over there. Okay. Coming back to what our discussion about BC19, we'll talk about this in future about BC20. Today we'll be talking about some of the changes in the development area. Well, there are quite a few which are specific about performance, so we'll talk about them in details, but these are a little brief ones, so I just wanted to go through them. Now, the first one about the change publisher or extension name. Now, this was always possible with pertinent extension, even in the past, but with this change, Microsoft allows what do we call them, ISV partners or app developers to change their publisher name or extension name if by mistake they have named it incorrectly for some reason. So now if you have an app on App Source and you want to change the publisher name, or if you want to change the extension name, you're allowed to do it even on App Source. The only thing that you need to note, whenever you do that, you also have to update the version. Yeah, that will invoke the update for all the customers who are using your app in Business Central SaaS. So more or less, the ID becomes the primary key going forward. And if your ID is same, which should be same, then you can still change the name and the publisher of your extension if required. Is about the image module. Now, I was not able to get an example out of it, and maybe it's something that I don't know much. But in Business Central 19, inside your system application, Microsoft have added a specific module for image. Now, this is an interface which allows you to implement these methods in this class of image, which talks about cropping an image, get different kind of formats, and then there is this enum for format, which talks about what different extension, file extension your image can have. Then you can get an image from base64 if you have to. That implementation is written here in this implementation code unit. You can get an image from stream. You can get the width of the image, height of the image. You can resize the image if you want. You can save an image that comes from outside and you can convert it to base64. I don't know how I'll use it, but this is something which is inbuilt in Business Central. If you have to do any kind of image handling going forward, make sure to look into the system application into this folder or this app called image, and this will help you in giving different options for managing your images in Business Central. I'll think of an example if I can. I don't know how I'll use it, but because if I try to, let me give you an example what I was trying. If I try to resize an image, it only gives me an option to pass the width and height, but it doesn't give me an option to which image I want to resize. So I don't know at this point. I might have to think about it, that how this is being used, from where it is picking the image, and then from where it is setting up all these properties and all. So I'll think about it if I can find that, and then maybe in future we'll see this one someday, image implementation that's available. Now I don't know how many of you are working with Azure Blobs, but if you are, there is again an app in the system application for your Azure Blob management APIs, which helps you to kind of deal with your Azure Blob to download and to create and list blobs in your Azure Blob directory. So if you ever have to do something on Azure storage and you want to reinvent the wheel, don't do that. It's all available here. All the methods are defined, how you create a container, how you delete a container, how you add files into containers and things like that in your Azure Blob. All that is written. So keep that in mind. In future, if you have to ever do anything regarding Azure Blob storage, APIs and all, then you can use this. This is all built in Business Central now. Okay, so those were the small one. Let's come to someone where I want to spend some time. Development, which is richer access control for extension source in cloud environment. Now, till now, or till Business Central 18, the only way I can limit my source code from being exposed is by using one simple property of show my code. Show my code used to tell compiler that is it debuggable? Can you download the source code, and can you see what objects are there in your symbol file? That all was controlled by one simple setting called show my code till business central 18. Now, I don't know how many of you work with different ISVs, but it becomes a problem when you're dealing or trying to resolve an issue from a code which is not written by you, or just if you want to get more info on it, it becomes very hard at that point. So what Microsoft has done is kind of eliminated this property. So if you are using it in your extension and you try to compile it in with a runtime version 8.0, which is the latest runtime version for 2021 release wave 2, then you cannot use the show my code. It's deprecated. And that gets replaced with a section of properties called resource exposure policy. Now it extends the horizon of what a partner or an reseller would like to expose, rather than just limiting it by saying yes or no on show my code property. So now an app developer or an app partner can say that, okay, I'll allow my code to be debugged. If someone else want to debug it, that's allowed. But I don't allow people to download my source code by going into extension management and then saying download source, which is, where is my business central? Okay, let me open it here. So now a ISV can tell us that define in their app that if somebody goes into extension management, can they click on download source or not? Earlier, all this was controlled by one setting. Now there is a separate setting to allow download source code. If you want your partners or customers to download the source code, then you can set it to true. And the third one is include source in symbol file. Now, the example of that would be that when you are building an extension which is dependent on an ISV extension, you also get symbols here. But what happens when you click on this? And that's what that property defines. Can somebody go in and see what's the code inside this object or not? That is defined by include source in symbol file. Now, I guess somebody asked last week that what happens if I allow debugging to true? And then I have a secret sauce in my code, which I don't want to expose, which makes complete sense because that's a real scenario that can happen. In that case, what you can do is in your code unit, if you have a procedure where you have your secret code, you can actually come above that code unit and define it non-debuggable. Which means if somebody is trying to debug and the process moves to your procedure, where your secret sauces, whatever that is, licensing or some crazy code that you have written and you don't want to share, then you can make that procedure as non-debuggable. So even if the app.json says allow debugging is true, the system will respect the tag here above the procedure that this procedure is non-debuggable. So that means the system will automatically step out of this procedure as soon as it goes in, and nobody will be able to see the variable values or see what code is written inside there. So if you are still using a runtime lower than 8.0, then you don't have to change this. You can still use the older show my code property. But then you need to remember that based on this runtime, there are some application features that get enabled or disabled. Like if you are on a runtime version 6.0 and lower, or if I'm not correct, maybe let me check. If you are on 7.2 or lower, 7.1 or lower, then you can't use report extension because that's a feature which works based on the runtime versions. So based on different runtimes, there are different features which are available in the app. So while building your extensions for your customer and while they are upgrading, make sure to update the runtime also so that you can use whatever is available with the latest runtime, and it also helps the customer at that point. But as you change this, you need to start this segment rather than show my code. Questions are all good there. Okay. Next one. Microsoft have extended general ledger posting aggregation, which is specifically about the invoice posting buffer tables in the methods that are there. Now, at this point, this option is not visible by default. So when you go into your different setups, like sales and receivable setup, you'll not be able to see or choose that option because that's not added, but you can still use it. You just have to get into personalization at that field, which is invoice posting setup. All right. Now, right now it's set to be invoice posting setup as default, and then there is invoice posting v19, which move to interfaces again. So let's spend a little bit time onto this, and let me open my base app if I can. Okay. This is the base app for BC19, and let me see. Okay. Let me copy this and make it easier from here. Okay. Now there should be an easy way to find things, but I don't know that for sure. Can I go to definition of this? This is the, oh, okay, I can go. Yeah, there are ways. Okay. So what we are looking at is invoice posting setup. Okay. So this option, as I was saying here, is added into sales, purchase, and the service menu, service setups. Now what it does is if you have the default one, then it let you run whatever it is, which is then it gets the invoice posting setup code unit and interface as the standard invoice posting setup, and then it checks the sales header. Okay. Now this is happening based on this enum, sales invoice posting. So let's go into that. So as we have seen about the interfaces, they run based on the enum, the option that you choose from. And here in this enum, if you see, there are two options and they both implements different options. The first one is doing an invoice posting as undefined post invoice, which is the default. And invoice posting v19 is with sales post invoice. So there would be an implementation defined with this code unit. Let's quickly look at that if I can. Can I find that? Yes. Okay. Now this is the sales post invoice implementation. And these are all the method in that interface, which is it is implementing. So this is the interface which is being implemented. So if you go to this, all these methods, as we talked about it, need to be declared at least in your implementation. But if you read about the documentation of it from Microsoft, it talks about that the reason why it is moved to an interface is because there are certain localization where it's required to have a different kind of invoice posting routine rather than what is available today, because you can't change the primary key, as we all know, of a table at this point. And Microsoft had some challenges with some certain localization where they were not sure how to use it. So with the interface, it gives you that option to kind of extend it or define your own implementation for all these different kind of routines. If you might want to use a separate table, I'm pretty sure that's also available. You can surely define that. And all the functions have been moved to this implementation rather than being on your code unit 80 and 90s of the world. I was reading some comments on Twitter, and I don't remember who said it, but somebody said it's not yet fully baked in, and not from Microsoft, but I guess someone, some MVP was saying this, I guess, and they were recommending that wait for the next release while this kind of bakes in properly because of emails being placed here rather than being on the posting code units. Because if I define my own interface, implementation of this interface, these events will not be available, and another pertinent extension or an app may have a dependency with these events, which are not available in my code. So think about it. The invoice posting buffer table, I guess it's marked for removal. I'm not sure, but let me see. Let me create it here. Posting buffer. Yeah, invoice post buffer is already marked for removal. So this is going away, and then this gets replaced with a new code unit or new record called invoice posting buffer, which will use the new method. It's not showing me the warning, which is weird. It normally should show me the warning at this point. Okay. But yeah, as we saw, this is kind of going away. We will understand what comes up in the next version kind of before we start changing this option if needed in our different localization. Okay. Our favorite topic about development is all about performance. Now, there has been two more performance areas where Microsoft have worked on, and we have already seen the implementation of the partial load, which now also work on the page object. So as soon as you define a page, whatever fields are there, they will only get loaded rather than all the fields getting loaded on a page. Assuming the same lines on the similar lines, they have changed something on keys, which is super interesting. And maybe I'll have to go back into history to maybe explain that fact, what that is. So anybody from NAV can tell me how many fields were allowed in a key when you add a key in NAV?
20. 20 or 16, something.
20, I guess. Yeah. So let's take this example, and you can also go back home and try this on nav. Now, I created an extension on customer table, and I know this for a fact because I got stuck on a situation with a customer in NAV, and this I have some fields. Let me count them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, 20, and 21. It has 21 field. Now, it didn't give me a compile time warning, and also a runtime warning. The key is already available on my database. I have published this extension. It's already published. And for sure, give it a try if you're working with NAV. But let me go to SQL now and go into my customer table. I don't know how you zoom this window. So when you are on the customer table, this is your customer table. If you expand it, our key is named as max key. So if I go into index, I'll see a key called max key, unique non-clustered. Now, the interesting part of it is it also happens in nav, and as Sandeep said, it maximum support of 16 fields. There's a max support till payment term code. So this is somewhere around 16, exactly 16. And then after this, all those fields were not even considered in SQL when you are trying to add a key. Now the change is not about this, but the change is about this screen, what we are seeing. In Business Central, you always see this column or this tab called included column. Now this normally remains empty. But for a customer back in 2013 or 14, I had to do something where I wanted to include some column, and I was able to do it back then in the NEP. The idea is with this change in the included columns in keys is to add new columns into included column, not just because they are excluded from this field range. I don't think you'll ever have to create a key with more than 20 fields or 16 fields, I hope. But if you have to, that's one reason. But the other reason is the included column performs faster than being on the columns in this index key, because they don't get indexed, but their performance is more faster than whatever is in the index column. So this might not be the right example for this, but if this is an example, if you go beyond that limit of the keys, the fields that you want there, then on every key that you have, you can have a property called include fields. And you can list down your additional fields there to be included in the key as included field. But this is not the use case scenario of it. The use case scenario of it is if you have some fields that you want to use in the included set, you can do it. And then a index with included column takes less time because it doesn't cache that much data in the index field. So it's more performance optimized and it requires less IO to the database. So if I change it like this, and let me see if this is disabled or not. Yes, this is. And let me publish it here. As soon as that gets published, and it's already published on my under the screen, if I refresh this customer table, go back here into index, in my max key, I'll have those 16 fields because I didn't reduce that. But then rest of the fields are in this included column section, which is now can get added by using just this property called include fields. Now, when I was thinking about how can I understand what's the benefit of included field, I came across this article about SQL because it's all about SQL. Now let me zoom this in. Let's read it through. Index with included column provide greater benefit with covering the query. This means that the index include all column referenced by your query, and you can add columns with data type, numbers, or size not allowed in an index column. So it's more or less about SQL, that there are certain types of fields that you cannot add into the index part, but with this you can add them into your included column part. Performance gain are achieved as the query optimizer can locate all the column within the index in fewer disk IO, as the table or the clustered index data is not accessed. So it doesn't index your data behind the scene in SQL Server while you're trying to use that particular index to execute whatever the process that you're executing. And it have less impact on your insert, update, and delete because there are less fields which are indexed. And here this guy is giving an example that if you have a select query on this table where age is greater than 25, then it scans the clustered index, which is the primary key, to fetch that field because there is no key attached to that. But if you create a index where age is the only field which is part of the index field, and then other fields that you need are part of the include field, which is this example, then the speed the amount of CPU that is used to calculate this reduces drastically. Now, sorry, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to utilize this based on different scenarios that you have, but this is what Microsoft documentation says about it, which is included column doesn't count against the 16 field in an index definition, which is it, the example that we saw, but that is not that much relevant. But a column which is included and not part of the index requires less IO on the database. And an index with an included column is a smaller and more likely to be cache in the database cache. So it will be fetched faster rather than if it is indexed. That's what Microsoft documentation talks about it. For developers, they just need to understand, and this is maybe not the right example. You will never reach to this point, I'm pretty sure. But if you are sure that you don't want to store have an index based on a certain field, then you can just include other fields that you need for your calculation in the include field section. And the performance of your code will remain as it is, or maybe better, because it gets cached into the memory. Any thoughts, questions based on SQL experience? I don't have much, I guess. Okay, so the next one is again about the keys, which is something which I got stuck last week during an upgrade project for a customer. You remember our old friend Shift? Now, Shift is something which is used to do calculations of numeric data types faster. But there are some very strict rules that need to be followed when you are working with Shift. The one rule is that you need to have a key where the sum index field is defined. So let me go back into my Business Central and just open this line and show you what I mean by that. When you have to use a sum index field, okay, why it is not going in? Okay. What you have to do is you have to do something like this. You have to create a key, and then based on that key, you need to define your sum index field of the numeric fields that you want to auto calculate more or less. Once you have defined the key with the sum index field defined, what it does behind the scene, it creates an index in SQL, and then it also creates a view which stores the data for your calculation that will be required. So let's quickly go and see in SQL for this key, GL account number and posting date, which is key2. Okay. So if I go and search for GL entry, what I'll see that there is an index called key2, which is pretty obvious because I have a key back in my Business Central, which is based on these three fields. There are no included column, but then where does this property goes, which is the sum index field? I see these fields over there, including the primary key of that table, which is this. I see the GL account number, posting date, and entry number, GL account number, posting date, and the primary key. That's all correct. But where I see the sum index field that I have added there, what happens when you define a sum index field is system creates a view. Now the view will be based on the table name, GL entry. So let's go GL entry, and then it'll have the key reference, key2. So the view actually stores the info for the calculation of your flow field. Oh, sorry, your sum index field. So it has GL account number, posting date, which is your key definition, and then it stores sum of all the fields that you are referring here in this key. Sum of amount, sum of debit amount, sum of credit amount, and so on and so forth. This is stored in that view to fetch that info. And then what you do is you do a set range or a set filter in your code, and then you do a calc sum to calculate the value of that sum index field. That's what the rules of sum index fields are. Now this all works perfect. There is a slowness based on how much data the table has, how many records it has, and how much data you are being referring for sum index field. But at the same time, you might at a point forget about defining a sum index field, but you are start writing that code into your code. And those are the situation where that code kind of fails because there is no view created for calculating that sum. So what Microsoft have done in this release is they have added something called as NCCI, which is non-clustered column index. This can help and provide you better performance, especially in situation where developer forgets to add one or more shift indexes while defining the key. So you might forget to add, let's say, amount column in this key while you were building the key, but later on while you are calling your code, you are trying to do a calc sum of amount. In that situation, your sum index field will fail. But using NCCI, that situation will be tackled by the platform automatically and super simple to define, which is you just go into the table and you define a new property called column store index. Now in this column store index, you can define all your sum index field that you were using earlier in your sum index property. In the way Microsoft Documents talks about it, about the transition of it, is you don't have to do a code update more or less, but you first have to define the column store index and define all the sum index field that you have used in different indexes or keys in Business Central, all of them here, and then come down into your keys area and remove keys which are referring to those sum index field. This is the transition path from a sum index field to a column store index approach. And this will not require your code that you have already written to be changed, but will help you to increase the performance of your code in different situations. Questions, thoughts about this? Okay. If not, then I guess that's, let me see if I had something else in here. Okay, yeah, what happens when you define an NCC? Yeah, I forgot to talk about it. So let's see, when I define NCC, this is what table? This table is my new GL entry. Okay. 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 So when you do a, for sure your index will reduce because you have dropped the keys, but it creates something like this, NCC, which is non-cluster column store. And this defines columns that you want based on the property that you have set in your table as a column store as a part of index. The cool part is it doesn't create a view for it. So if you see my new GL entry, you will see nothing in here with the name of my new GL entry. It contains my GL entry, but there's no my new GL entry. So it completely eliminates the uses of view. It creates this non-clustered column store in your indexes automatically for that table. And then this is being used when you do a cal sum going forward in your code. Now, will this completely help in performance? I don't know. I still have to kind of give it a try how this actually, I might have to develop a case scenario, but I can test out how this helps more or less. But because all these key related changes and index related changes that all anytime happens in the product, you need a database where there is good amount of data to verify that yes, there is an impact or there is not an impact of this change. It's very hard to kind of compare. I did try debugging this, but the debugger had more or less similar queries. Other than using a view, it was using a sum method in the query when I was debugging this. But there was nothing major that I was able to see because the Cronus database has very limited data, and it might not be the right database to test it. Okay.
Has Microsoft changed this one for this net balance and then I mean net change and balance in GL entries? Like earlier it was Swift and now they are using this NCCI.
They haven't yet. It is just announced in Business Central 19. The table that I was showing, that was just kind of my copy. I just created a copy of it. But the standard GL table still have those as some index field. Maybe going forward they might change it. I don't know. But this is what's available, and Microsoft will slowly roll it out as they test everything on it.
Okay.
Okay. Now, going back to Sam, your question, which you were talking about in before the meeting, let me quickly show you what me and Sandeep were saying.
Okay.
So, let's say you are on your, let's go to purchase. You're doing purchase. Okay. Okay. Where is that? Yeah. So when I do a copy document, and let's say I'm copying, I hope I have an order. Okay. Yes. And then I include header and recalculate the lines and click OK. This doesn't create a line. This normally creates a line, not in quotes.
No, it wasn't copy document. It was make an order. I was able to try it, and it took the empty line into the purchase order. It worked successfully, actually.
Right. But what I'm saying is, if you have to kind of see that code, I for a fact know that it works. But let me see. If I go to sales order and create a new one, maybe I need to copy it from a posted document, then it works. Okay, let me see that. Okay. If I pick it from, let's say, posted invoice, and pick any of those. See this one? It's tagged as comment. In the older version, it was tagged as blank normally. Now they say it as comment. And then it copies the copied reference number from where this is copied as the first line. So on the similar lines, you can modify that code that the first line automatically gets created as a blank line with the description of from where, from which it is copied from. And then, you'll have all the following lines after that. Does that make sense, Sam?
It does. Yeah, it does. Do you think if I get to remove the what is configured on the purchase code, it could be as again a GL account, a vendor item. If I remove that GL account, I just want to see the purchase code. Is the posting going to be impacted? Obviously it is, because I just removed the GL account.
Yes,
If you remove the GL account, yeah.
So what
Well, it's,
trying to do is having a type as purchase code. That will
It's so
obviously
much
impact a lot
work.
of things.
Yeah, it's so much work. If you change that, then you have to update it everywhere
and
in the system.
the posting would be updated because I would have to tap into the purchase code card, pull what is configured that. It could be a GL, it could be item, then change the whole posting. This would take me a century.
Right. What I'm saying is, and then there is another idea which you don't have to even write a single line of code. And I was thinking about is where you were. You were here. Let's come here, and then you went into what? Oh man. Okay. Get standard purchase code. Yeah. Let's say the new one is this is new. Let's say this is test. Okay. Testing 01. Okay, and currency code is USD, let's say. Oh, what's that? Okay, let's say Canada. Okay. Then, because there are the same options, I can put it like this as purchaser code, testing 1001, item, whatever item I want, and then let's say GL account.
Oh, I got it. This is just brilliant. Oh, this is great. I get it. If you post it, it would go to the lines. It has the comments, item, and GL account. It's spiffing. Great. Yeah.
Right? So must be equal to blank. Okay.
Oh, what's that? Oh, the item is blocked, perhaps.
Where was that? Oh man.
No, you don't need to go fancy with the purchase code. Just an item, and that's fine, really.
No, I just added the currency, which is not required, I guess.
I think the currency is required. I'm not sure.
Okay,
Give it
so
a shot.
you see that the first line came as PC, whatever the code is, and then the rest of the line as it is, right?
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
Without
Brilliant.
even writing code, you can just modify how your codes are defined, and then in the card you can define the first line as being blank, and then start using it as it is. Something like this.
Do I need to pay for this or something?
Man.
This is just. I didn't think of it. I didn't. I just went to coding. I started working on the purchase code card and everything. This is. Oh my god. Thank you.
Not a problem. Okay, so this was it for today, and then next week we are kind of off due to Diwali holiday, and I'm traveling actually on 6th. I am still not sure about 13. I might have a go live, but I'll try to make it on 13. So we'll see you maybe on 13. I'm not sure yet about 13. If that go live kind of get early completed or postponed, I'll surely send updates to everybody. But yeah, it's not majorly about go live because this month I have done 3 go lives in October, and every time we were able to do a BC open discussion. And every Saturday I was actually doing a go live before and after the meeting. So let's see how it goes. And somebody was raising their hand, I guess.
Yeah.
Hi, Saurabh.
Yeah, Balaji.
Yeah, you were mentioning that I mean in the start that Microsoft was going to like charge extra for modifying the base app and then like using the on-prem. So that is for the customers who are buying new license, like on-prem customers buying new license, or for the existing customers, how the Microsoft is, how the policy will be affected.
So when you upgrade your license in 2022, and this is all my expectation at this point, there's no official documentation about it, but every year when a customer upgrades, they have to update their license, right?
Uh-huh.
So in 2022, in the license, there are 2 additional modules that they need to purchase if they are matching any of these 2 scenarios.
I doubt
Okay.
that.
Otherwise, they'll not be able to publish. You will not be able to publish their extension on their environment.
I doubt that Microsoft never makes the customer change the price. for upgrade.
No, they don't change the price, but like you need to update the license matching to the version that you're going, right?
That's fine. But
Yeah.
Microsoft has in the past never forced the customer to buy any additional license.
Yes,
So
that's
the
true.
basic principle is that the protected list price remains the same, and
But
customer can
then,
pay
then you, if
annual
you,
enhancements as the same.
yeah, but then you, if you think about it in that way, and I guess I also had a discussion with someone else in my organization about it. There's no other way that Microsoft can control it on-prem other than license.
For future
Because
customers,
yeah, as a it's yeah, maybe for future customer. Let's see once the detail kind of gets available, because it's still kind of pretty dark. I'm also shooting in dark when I'm saying this. I just saw that slide. I read some comments on Twitter. This is what I was thinking about it. I had discussions with few of my colleagues. We think this might be the only way that Microsoft can put this in place for on-prem, because for SaaS they know what's happening and nobody can modify base app. Target will be SaaS. So what else other than license that Microsoft can do to stop something like this? I don't know.
even license will not stop this. This will only discourage people. That's all. The cost increases, so cost benefit analysis will become um,
But
disadvantageous to the customer. Other than
it's
that, it will not
act
stop.
yeah, it's actually not for the customer. Again, I'm going back to the same point. It's for the partner to
Yes,
what
yes, true,
what they are writing, more or less,
true, very
right?
true.
And this might be something that customer partners need to talk in the meetings initially when the project starts. That if you do this kind of customization, then there is an additional price that you have to pay. Maybe let's rework this custom into this way so that it doesn't cost you in future. Things like that.
But I'm
And
looking at, say, integrations where the DLL has to be used.
right.
What to do?
Yeah, those are those are the scenario where it kind of becomes a little bit hard. But let's see.
For some customers who are using nav from like start nav 5 or 4, like even we have modified the base app, Microsoft app, and then we have delivered. So we found it very difficult to segregate the customizations and base app. So yeah, it could be costly for us. Yeah.
Now it's as in I have a personal view, and this is not based on after I reading this update, and maybe I'm not working with that complex customer. I know how Indian customers are for sure, but I always believe that if we don't customize the base app, then they will be able to upgrade, because in this era of Business Central, a customer will have to upgrade every 1.5 year, either they like it or not, because 1.5 year is the product life cycle,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
as of today, Business Central 17 life is till March 2022. Anybody who's on Business Central 17 will have to upgrade to Business Central 19 or 20 in March, somewhere around that time.
Yep.
If you
Yep.
modify the base app, then that is impossible, as in literally impossible, or so much expensive. Not impossible, impossible may not be the right word, but expensive.
Mm-hmm.
That is true,
Upgrade,
Saurabh.
yeah,
But I'll give you one small example. Though it's not Microsoft W1, but Indian localization bug. I've been resisting customizing the localization app for last 1 month, and I'm
right.
stuck. They have created a bug which is increasing the processing time of transactions. And just to give you the context, if I'm creating one line general,
Hmm.
it will process one time. But if I'm creating two lines, it will process every time both the transactions
Hmm.
while posting. So if the
What?
problem is the customer is importing 100 lines, so it becomes a
Right,
factor of 100. So
right.
100 plus 99 plus 98. So that many number of times will processing will happen.
That's true. Yeah, there are scenarios. I'm not I'm not debating on that. And
So I'm
the
resisting it, but to
yeah,
a certain extent, my customer is accommodating, but the moment if it is unaccommodative, then base app will be modified. And now this is not the customer's mistake. This is not the partner's intention to do it. And you
Right.
have to buy that app. Additional cost.
Right. Let's see how that shapes in.
Right. It will be debated very fiercely. But
Right.
again, matlab, the future is SaaS. So you
Yeah,
have to
future
go.
is SaaS. It's pretty obvious. Yeah. Okay. So see you next week. Enjoy your Diwali. Have
you.
a safe Diwali. And then we'll see you on 13th of November.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Saurabh. I'll try to later. Thank you.
Yeah, happy Diwali, Saurabh.
Happy
Thanks.
Diwali.
Thank you.
Happy Diwali
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks.
Happy
Yeah.
Diwali.
Saurabh, and happy Diwali to all everyone.
Thanks.